And so I thought it might be, helpful as we get started just to present a bit of an orienting sort of map of what I think are two really fundamental, different yet related, yet different aspects of this journey that we'll be making together, at least the way that, at least based on my own experience. And, so there's the psychotherapy side, the psychological inquiry side, really, which is a working with, attending to, a shepherding, a midwifing of those wounds around love. Because if we were to reduce all psychological wounding down into one wound, we might say that that is the wound around love. And so that's one side, right? And the other side is what we might call the more spiritual or transpersonal part of the journey, which is more not so much of attending to and a metabolization and illuminating of our past and of what's being held necessarily in the body and the nervous system in shadow, but more of an attunement to what we might call, or many traditions would call, our essential nature, or our true nature, or our divine nature, or God, or spirit. We all have our own sort of languaging for this. And so there's that meditative path that we'll be exploring, which is a mindful attunement with compassion to just the immediacy of our here and now unfolding experience. What is it that's arising to be met? And training ourselves in a certain way with the help of one another and with the help of the relational field to come into what we call a shared or a joined window of tolerance, where we're able to access emotions, images, feelings, memories, somatic contractions in the body that we're just not able to get to on our own. And it's not so much a going into the content, going into the narrative, into the story level, into unfolding and unpacking that. Not the meditative, attunement, mindful part of the work we'll be doing, but it's the creation of an internal holding environment where embodied, compassionate awareness itself is the ultimate holding and healing agent. So that's sort of one side of the story, if you will. And so the psychological side, the relational side, these wounds around love, what we sometimes referred to as tending to the unlived life, what it is that remains unlived within us, which is both unlived grief and pain and sorrow, but it's also the unlived joy, the unlived creativity, the unlived capacity to play in this reality, which many of us have, understandably so, have lost contact with. Maybe this was something that we had access to, direct access to as a young child. Many of us didn't have it then either. And so it's really the digesting and the metabolizing of those, wounds around love, which are relational wounds. And so whether we call them, rupture in an attachment bond, or relational trauma, or the effects of a narcissistic injury, there's all these different classes of relational wounding, and we might get into some of that, the differentiation of those and what those are. I'm sure we will at some point, but it's the digesting and the metabolizing of that in the body, and also by way of what we call narrative, which is our capacity to imagine, to reimagine, to dream a new dream, to tell a new story, to be the author of a new poem that is our lives. So there's the somatic piece, the emotions and the instinctual energy in the body and the nervous system, and all of that arousal that for many of us just remains unilluminated, unheld, deep in our cells, in our muscles, in our patterns of breathing, in our bellies, in our throats, and in those parts of the brain that are subcortical. So all of that material that's undigested lives in subcortical and bodily circuitries. And so there's an unpacking and an unfolding of that, a dialoguing with that, a visualizing that out in the front of us and having a relationship with not only the feelings, the emotions, the sensations, the thoughts, but also the figures who are carrying all of that on our behalf. Sometimes those are what we would call an inner child. Often they are. They're younger parts of ourselves that get sort of caught or stuck or frozen or crystallized in that time machine effect that is relational trauma. And so the psychological piece, the relational piece, the imaginal dialogue piece isn't just a bare witnessing of what we're experiencing. And so it's different than the meditative path, and we'll alternate between these. And when it comes to the imaginal work, this dialoguing with the inner figures, this can be new for many of us. But I think what I want to say about that is, in my experience, we can all find our relationship to that. Because the truth is that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to open our hearts to a concept. Because even if we sort of are aware that there might be, for example, some anger present or some sadness present, sadness, anger, grief, worry, fear, panic, these are all concepts. It's like there's already a way that there are dissociative movements away from that immediate lived experience. We can't open our hearts to a concept. We can't get that movement going in psyche and in the heart with a concept like anger. But if we can invite that anger, we can request or ask that anger to reveal itself, to show itself to us as an image, to reveal itself to us as a figure. There's so much that can appear then. And we enter into relationship with that figure that appears, who can speak with us about the anger. Could be where it came from, what it needs, what it's all about, and what purpose it's serving, what function it's serving. Because all of our emotional experience is serving a very important function. It's intelligent, but we have to liberate it. We have to bring it back into our conscious awareness in order to experience it as a healing agent. And so I think the point is that we need both. At least that's my experience. We need the psychological work, the emotional work, the somatic work, the imaginal work, the digesting and the metabolization of unlived experience, unmetabolized experience. Otherwise, the container, the vessel, the alchemical vessel of the body, and will be leaky. It'll be cut off from our bodies and from the soul. And there's a way then that our lives and even our spiritual lives can remain ungrounded and unintegrated. But on the other hand, just sort of endless work on the personality and my historical wounding, and there's a way that also doesn't allow us to attune and to live from our essential nature of something that's being in direct living relationship with something that's always already here, that was never affected by what happened to us in the past, that dimension that we call our true nature, our essential being.